This stuff's been on the Stingray since Korea. Oh, hello. Uh, Come on, don't be mean. Don't be mean. Come on. There we go. Let's talk about music for a second. I like music. I like music a whole lot. And one of the things that I really, really enjoy about doing these entries is picking the songs out and cutting them and pasting them and making the intro and the exit sound good. And I'm not particularly good at it, but I really like that. And I suppose if I were to get a job in a field outside of the one that I'm in right now, I would probably go back to school for, like multimedia audio and video editing type stuff, because I really, really enjoy that. I love the technological craft of it. I like being able to hear things and see things in my head. Stop laughing. I like being able to hear things and see things in my head, and then mix them together and put them together on the computer, and then suddenly, poof! All the stuff that I've had running around in my head, I now have running around on the computer, and it's not running around inside of my head anymore. There's this really, really great movie called It Might Get Loud. I think that's what it's called. Hold on for a second. Let me go look. Yeah, I was right. It's a movie called It Might Get Loud, and it's this kind of a guitar documentary that has Jimmy Page and The Edge from U2 and Jack White as three kind of very different guitarists coming together and sharing their love of the craft. And at one point, The Edge, who's by far the most technologically forward of the three, says something about how he drives everybody crazy trying to get the sound that he can hear in his head to come out through the speakers. And I sympathize with that. I feel kind of the same way when I'm building this stuff. I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy this as much as I do. I don't have the some of the more traditional gifts of creativity at my disposal. I'm hugely envious of my nephew. My nephew is just absolutely brilliant, and he's got a gift for music. And it pains me sometimes when I think about the fact that he doesn't have as much time to pursue it as he used to, or maybe even the fact that some people may have soured that for him. It pains me a great deal because he has a gift and he creates, and I wish I had that. I wish I had to me anyway, a more meaningful gift of creation, the ability to put things like that together. I can't work with my hands very well. Kind of a putz like that, so I guess this, in my own small way, is how I create things. In any event, I really do enjoy music, and I put a lot of effort into picking the songs for the openings of these clips and for the interludes and for the endings and stuff. And I was going to this. We're obviously going to spend a little bit, because if you're at all clever, you've read the title, and we're going to talk about Apple stuff. And there's this absolutely beautiful song that my nephew introduced me to by a group called Band of Horses called The Funeral. And you should absolutely go and listen to it, because it is really a very, very pretty song. And pretty is not a good word. It's beautiful. It's very well done. And I thought, this is a beautiful song. I cut it up and I got it mixed, and I put it together on the storyboard for this project that I'm building for this, what you now see in front of you. And I just thought, God, it's a beautiful song, but it's completely and totally wrong for the tone that this video is going to take, and the direction that this video is going to take. And then I got to thinking to myself, what I put there instead, and kind of about the love-hate relationship that I'm going to be discussing, and even as I was thinking about that, a song just immediately sprung to my head, and I thought, oh my God, that's that's bloody brilliant. So you're going to hear that in a second, but this is a really, really long monologue for me to tell you that yeah. Let's talk about Apple. somewhere around April of 2013, my super awesome whiz-bang media server, cum file server, cum gaming rig, cum everything else that I wanted it to be because it was absolutely awesome, PC rig that I had named Eleanor, crashed on me. Suffered 3 relatively massive hardware failures: motherboard, RAM, and CD-ROM, I think. And I had gotten to the point where I just really wasn't looking forward to putting something like that together again. One of the great strengths of Windows and indeed the PC platform, has always been the customization that you can do with it, and there are pros and cons to be had with it, and Windows versus Apple is this thing. You get the same argument that you get with Android versus Apple. Windows and the PC platform, and Android and its operating platforms are easily more powerful than the stuff that Apple is going to produce, by simple virtue of the fact that it's a great deal more flexible. You can do a whole lot more stuff with it, and the top-end hardware just smokes anything that Apple's got like a ham. That's always been a universal truth. It continues to be the universal truth today. There are consequences for that, however. Obviously, what was it that the man said? The more complex you make the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain. I'm pretty sure I misquoted that, and I'm sorry, Joe. But I mean, it's true. You can do a whole lot more with the PC platform and with Windows and with Android, but it takes a lot of maintenance to do it. It takes a lot of effort to do it, especially if you're not quite sure what you're doing at first, and it's more susceptible to stuff crashing. It's more susceptible to viruses. There aren't as many Mac users in the world. Why in the world would I target 100,000 people when I could target the 90 million instead? That's just the simple truth of it. But when an Eleanor crashed, I really wasn't looking forward to putting another server together, and I thought about where I was at that point in my life, and I was like, I'm really playing fewer and fewer games on the PC, and I'm spending less and less time on the PC, period. I retired from IT work back in 2011, and had really just been spending less and less time with PCs in general, because I kind of got sick of them because of the people professionally. And so I thought, okay, do you want to spend another $1,500-$1,600 on building another super rig, or do you want to go another avenue? And so I thought, you know what, I spend most of my time on the internet casually browsing. I write my emails, I do some document management, I do some very light multimedia work, and I write in my blog. So maybe just getting a nice light laptop will do instead of getting a desktop, and I could plug all my peripherals, like my monitor and my keyboard and my mouse, into it when I was sitting at my desk, and when I wanted to go mobile, I could go mobile, and it would be great. This was right around the time that Windows 8 was coming out, and there was this just gorgeous Acer flipbook that I loved, and it really was a neat design. So rather than going out and getting a new server, I just went out and bought that Acer laptop instead. And what I quickly discovered was that while it was capable of doing what I wanted it to do, because I had not bought a top flight system, I didn't get that snappy performance that I was after, and there were some hardware limitations, and it was just a little bit slower, and then you insert all the other complications with dealing with Windows, and the fact that it was Windows 8, not even Windows 8.1 at the time, and so the operating system was relatively new. and I really just wasn't enjoying it at all. And there was an incident where Windows 8, the first several project directories where I had built the first several of my audio blog entries that are up on YouTube, and I was like, I was frustrated enough with it at that point that I was really kind of starting to step away from PCs altogether, and right around this time, some very, very good friends of mine from out on the East Coast had come in visiting with some frequency, and the normally diehard PC people were smuggling Macs into my house, MacBook Airs to be precise, and iPads. And after giving them untold quantities of grief for that, because Apple is the devil and Macs are inferior to PCs, etc., etc. J.J. Abrams, lens flare, Cupertino. You know what? They're very, very smart people. Some of the smartest folks I know. So I sat down and talked to them, legitimately as a PC user. How do you like it for this and that and the other? And they're basically coming to the same conclusions that I did, where they weren't doing as much on the PC anymore, and they just wanted something a little bit lighter and a little bit lower maintenance, and so they struck out on a whim and they bought a Mac, and that idea kind of stuck in my head and slowly began germinating, and I went and was fortunate enough. Very, very good friend of mine at work named Justin had a spare MacBook sitting around, his 15-inch MacBook, that he let me borrow for a week. And while I was using that, I wrote a series of articles in my blog called In an Unholy Land about just learning how to use it and the trials and tribulations that I had with it and what some of the problems were and some of the heartaches. And when everything was said and done, it was around this time last year. And I really kind of had a bug to go and buy a Mac. My wife, I love desperately, and she indulges me, and so I went and bought a MacBook Air last September, shortly before our trip to Hawaii that we took, and I absolutely fell in love with the thing, and I'm still in love with it right now. My brother-in-law and my sister are borrowing it right now to try and see whether or not they like it. And then one thing led to another, and I ended up getting this big iMac and some peripherals and this and that and the other, and now here we are a year later, and it struck me that, I've had, I talked to some people recently that, it was advice about Windows and this and that and the other and blah, 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 and well, you could do this, you could do that. Well, what have you done? I have a Mac. And there was this hugely awkward silence. I'm like, really? How long have you had a Mac? Well, I've had a Mac for about a year now. What do you think of it? What do I think of Apple products in general? Apple products in general, because I haven't just been using the Mac. I've also been using iPhones quite a bit lately. I have an iPhone right now that I'm working with. But it's kind of a love-hate relationship. It really, really is. I will go ahead and say educated in the world of computers, and I know quite a bit about Macs, and I know quite a bit about PCs, and it really is kind of a love-hate relationship between the two of them. There are definitely pros and cons to both platforms. For instance, I absolutely love the uniformity of Apple's operating platforms, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or a Mac. There's a great deal of uniformity. Yeah, there's some visual differences between iOS and OS X. All of the 3-digit things. There's some differences visually, but they all really kind of feel like they're from the same family of software. Windows Winfo 7 and Winfo 8 and Winfo 10 looked completely and totally different from Windows 7 when they first came out, and they really didn't feel cohesive at all. Microsoft's operating platforms are only now starting to become more cohesive, and Apple got there just a little bit quicker and a great deal more smoothly, and I can appreciate that, being able to move from peripheral to peripheral. And just know how to use them and be comfortable with them. I hate that a little bit too, because the reason why you can do that, the reason why you can move from one Apple product to another, is because absolutely nothing is new. No major operating system components for this thing have changed in so long. It's with OS X, with iOS, everything looks the same. It's really starting to get old. It really, really is. By the same token, I absolutely love the fact that because Apple is operating inside of their little walled garden and that nothing has changed, I will say that everything on most of Apple's products is super duper polished. The vast majority of the things that you interface with really there's a lot of thought that's gone into them, and they've just been polished, and everything just looks and runs great. The downside to that, the hate of that, is I really, really hope you like polish, because there's absolutely no changing it whatsoever. This is what you get. So I hope you like the world. And while we're talking about that world, I love the fact that it's relatively simple and easy to use. I haven't, prior to 2014 and starting to use, buying my MacBook Air, I hadn't really spent any extensive amount of time with Macs since 2007, 2008, when I worked for an ad company. But again, the great thing is that they're simple and easy to use, and they haven't ever changed, so I was able to pick right back up where I left off. Really nothing shocker there. Apple's world is a simple, easy world to live in. The downside to that is Apple's world is also very, very small. Everything is just so stinking locked down on these computers. You can't explore the computer. You're actively encouraged not to explore the computer. Apple doesn't want you to know what's going on the inside of their computers or their phones or whatever. They don't want you to look at the file system. They just want you to push a button, and they'll say that a thing happens, and they want you to take your word for it. And for some people, that's fine. But for anybody with half a brain who has any experience with computers whatsoever, we kind of get curious about stuff like that, and it's really not the easiest thing in the world to delve into on OS X or iOS. It's really, don't pay attention to the man behind the green curtain. Just, I am the great and powerful Oz. People aren't universally ignorant anymore on the use of computers. Universal ignorance is still in abundance. It's just shifted to other areas. It's really, really frustrating. The global IQ where computers are concerned is slowly but surely raising, and Apple is not keeping up with those times. That's just extraordinarily frustrating. The upshot to that, and this is another love, is the Apple products that I've used are extraordinarily stable. They do not crash. They do not have to reboot. They do not lock up. My applications do not close unexpectedly. They just work. The downside to that, the hate, is that it is, again, I've kind of touched on this, it's completely inflexible and completely inaccessible unless you're a Linux god. There's no middle ground. There's no middle ground whatsoever. I understand why it's built the way that it is, and I understand the fact that everything is walled off and behind locked doors contributes to the overall stability of the operating system. As somebody who's spent nearly 20 years working professionally in the IT field and numerous years personally beyond that, that you can get into the guts of Windows and customize it and personalize it is absolutely wonderful. But again, the more you go in and start screwing with stuff, sooner or later something's going to break. And while the level of intelligence where computers are concerned is raising slowly, it hasn't raised that much. Windows gives people too many chances to screw it up. It's setting itself up to fail in a lot of ways. So, again, definitely love-hate there. There's lots of familiar, easy-to-use programs that come bundled with Apple's programs, but the downside to that is one of the reasons why they're familiar and easy to use is because they've been around forever. Apple is not innovating anymore. They're no longer leading. And in a lot of places, different is being done for the sake of different and not necessarily for the sake of better, which is bad. It's the wrong reason to change things. FaceTime is a perfect example of this. I love FaceTime. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I love FaceTime with my brother's kids. I think it's very, very smooth. I think the way that they've tied FaceTime and continuity together is absolutely fantastic. Continuity is Apple's service that allows you to link the functionality of your computer, your phone, and your iPad, as long as they're all Apple products, together into one. So if you get a phone call on your iPhone, you can take it on your computer or on your iPad. If you get a text message, you can take it on your computer and on your iPad. And, if you're sitting there shaking your head going, yeah, we've been able to do that for a while, most folks have no idea why that's cool. They have no idea, and props to Apple for this. They have no idea what an insane logistical Charlie Foxtrot that must have been to set up. It's a hugely impressive achievement. Hugely impressive. The downside to all of it is that you can only do it when all of your devices are on the same wireless network. And there are several of you that have already spoken up and went, Steve, you've been able to do all of that for a really long time with Google Hangouts. You're absolutely right. You have been able to do a lot of it with Google Hangouts. You can do more with Google Hangouts than you can with Apple's continuity and FaceTime. FaceTime is just way, way more polished. Just way more polished. But they're behind. Again, love and hate. That's what the last year has been. Just an awful lot of love and hate. I tell people all the time that one of the primary reasons, as somebody who's good with computers, and I'll say that about myself, one of the primary reasons why I really, really enjoy using the Apple products is that they are products for people who don't want to have to computer in order to computer. I don't want to have to jump through hoops to do things. I don't want to have to, install a dozen updates before I can run a program. I just want to be able to get on my computer and do something and then leave it again. I don't want to have to worry about anything else. So that's the love. The hate to that is it's a good thing that I don't want to have to worry about doing anything else, because you really can't do anything else. Again, completely and totally inflexible. If you want flexible, go and get yourself a PC, build it from scratch. As a tester, as a would-be engineer who's friends with many actual engineers, who loves all of his engineers just absolutely to death, I don't look at Apple products and see nearly as many warts on them as I do PCs. I'm very, very intimately familiar with PCs, so too with Android phones. I look at my iMac and my MacBook Air and my iPhone, and I just see a phone and just see computers and just see a laptop. I don't really see nearly as many warts on these products as I do PCs. And a lot of that comes from naivete. A lot of that comes from the fact that I haven't lived with these things for longer. If you stop and think about that, though, the hate behind it is, in retrospect, there are just as many warts. The warts are just in different places. Both platforms have their faults. It's just a question of how quickly you stumble into them. I will go ahead and say that Apple makes it a little bit more complicated to stumble into their warts. So kudos on that front. I love the fact that these products were all extraordinarily easy to set up. My laptop, my iMac, the iPhones that I've been using, they're all extraordinarily easy to set up, extraordinarily easy to use for the most part. I absolutely hate the fact that for as much as, your Apple groupies and your Mac users are all the collective and the hive and social people, this is one of the most isolated computing experiences and telephone experiences I have ever been exposed to in my life. It is so difficult to go anywhere outside of just this computer. Networking is a pain in the ass. Advanced hardware assets are a pain in the ass. A perfect example of this is external file storage. The vast majority of the world uses drives formatted NTFS. Why? Because that's what Windows uses. And if you're interested in communicating with the external storage devices that the vast majority of the world uses, you would think that your computer would have support for those drives, a la NTFS support. But Apple doesn't. Apple doesn't have NTFS support on any of their computers. They can read them, they just can't write to them. This is extraordinarily frustrating because the drivers to write to NTFS external storage media are actually present and have been present for some time in Apple's operating systems. They've just simply chosen not to enable them. Instead, you've got to go and contact third-party companies like Tuxera or Paragon and pay $20 a year basically to unlock the ability to read and write to NTFS drives. That is just asinine. And it's like that with a lot of different stuff. Network storage is another thing they're just so far behind the time with, anybody who wants to go above and beyond. You just can't. And on one hand, again, I realize that that's part of the reason why the operating system is so stable. On the other hand, the connected home is getting beyond Apple. The connected home is getting beyond Apple, and it's really, really easy to say, well, if you want to use all this stuff, Apple makes network storage, and Apple makes this, and Apple makes that, and Apple. People are making better stuff than Apple's making right now in a lot of different spaces. People are making cheaper stuff that just as much. And you know what? All the PC and Linux guys, they have a gee old time with this stuff. Just not Apple. That's so frustrating. So frustrating as somebody who used to be able to go anywhere and do everything. I've got this gorgeous NAS is sitting over on top of my bookshelf. Just massive amounts of storage, all this capability that I should be able to use in order to stream media and this and that and the other, and I've got to work through this kludgy-ass web interface on it because of things like Samba and a lack of NTFS support. And it just drives me batshit crazy sometimes. Moving on. I've grown to appreciate the fact that about 90% of everything you could want or look for is exactly where you think it is on an Apple product. I will absolutely give them props for that. It's you reach for a lot of things instinctively, and they're just there. They've made a lot of improvements in a lot of places that Windows could really stand to take some pointers from. The downside is the other 10% is in a completely batshit crazy location that you won't find until it's too late, and it's frustrating because that 10% is frequently really important stuff that you might need. A perfect example of this is the control panel on iOS device, not iOS, excuse me, OS X devices. On Macs, it's called System. What is it? System preferences. 90% of the control panel type stuff that you're used to finding for your computer is there. The other 10% of it completely fucking scattered over the entire system. File type associations, yeah, you've got to go right click and go into the properties for a file folder in order to find file type associations. What the fuck? I don't understand. I really, really don't. Again, one of the peculiarities. Love and hate. Another thing that I absolutely, hands down, love. The hardware. The hardware is just phenomenal. I mean, this is a standard stock, comes with a computer, Apple keyboard. It's Bluetooth, it's light, it has half-height keys. The travel is absolutely phenomenal. The keyboard layout is absolutely phenomenal. It's wonderful. It's aluminum. It feels sturdy. It just works as soon as you turn it on. Here's another excellent little thing. This is one of their Magic trackpads. Again, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal hardware. The hardware is so nice. So too with the iPhones. The iPhones feel like a really, really good, well-built, crafted, quality piece of hardware. The mouse, the mice still suck. Apple's pointing devices for mice are just still god-awful. Absolutely awful. True story. Again, back when I was working for that advertising agency, I used to be responsible for cataloging all of the spare hardware that the PC guys would use, and we'd get shipments of new mice in, and the mice would just suddenly disappear. And what we realized was happening was that none of the PC guys were getting their mice because the Mac guys were coming downstairs and taking them because they had a right click. And when I went and confronted them, they were like, "Well, we want the other button because the right click's so awesome, and we really enjoyed it." I'm like, second mouse button. Welcome to the 21st century. Their pointing devices are just absolutely wretched. I loathe iTunes. I understand what Apple's trying to do with iTunes. I understand why Apple's trying to do what they're trying to do with iTunes. It's a crappy reason. It's a horrible program. It was only made more horrible by the port for Windows. It's horrible what it does to your phone. It's horrible how it tethers your phone. It's just a god-awful program. Just a god-awful program. And it's a shame because it's integral to so much about the collective Apple experience. I absolutely love iTunes. I love everything that it stands for. That's kind of a hate. I did this backwards. What do I absolutely love? What do I love the most about my Apple products? I love the fact that I can load PC and Android apps on them. I tell people all the time that the absolute best thing about my iPhone are the Android apps that I have on it. Do I want to use iTunes? No. Do I want to use the absolutely phenomenal Google Play Music? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Do I want to use Google Hangouts? Yes, I do. Do I want to use OpenOffice? Do I want to use Microsoft Office? Do I want to use Google Apps? Do I want to use anything other than Pages and Keynote? Yes, I do. Yes, I absolutely do. And I guess kudos to Apple in that area, because they could have just not allowed people to produce that software, or not allowed the software to run on their machines. Yeah, somebody somewhere would have figured out a way to make it work. But it was a step in the right direction for them. You want people to buy your stuff, you need to make it easy to migrate from one world to the next. And while we're talking about that, migrating from the PC world to the Mac world, if you were interested in migrating from the PC world to the Mac world, should you do it as a professional? If you're trying to do it for professional reasons, if you want to move from a PC to a Mac on your professional machine, I would tell you, for God's sakes, no. I'm sorry, but Macs are still not designed for professional work. We've got an entire wing of people at my office that do design work, and every single one of them has to have jury-rigged network access and jury-rigged applications, and none of their crap runs the way that it should on the network. They're not designed for professional work. They're just not. Apple doesn't make their machines ready for it. The rest of the world knows this, and so the rest of the world hasn't put enough interest in Apple's devices to make them work professionally, unless you're in an all-Apple environment and somebody has spent a redonkulous amount of money on this stuff. It's just a horrible professional option. Just an absolutely horrible professional option. Personally, if you're somebody who's not a computer hotshot and you don't use your computer for a whole lot, and you're willing to kind of pick around and learn a new operating system, you're not going to have a whole lot of problem migrating at all. You'll have to buy some new software, and you'll have to come to grips with some of the new quirks of the Mac operating system. The DMG installation scheme, whoever designed that was just a moron. What I'm going to do when I want to install something that I download from the internet, I'm going to unzip it, and then I'm going to double click on the executable to start the installation program. Except it doesn't. It puts this little icon. It puts this little DMZ icon on your desktop, and then you've got to double click that, and that should start the installation wizard. But it doesn't. It just opens up this window over here that says you need to click and drag this icon over to your applications folder. And okay, so if I click it and move it over to the applications folder, that means it must now be installed and I can use it, except that's what actually starts the installation wizard. And then when you're done with that, you have to eject this DMZ as though it were physically an object on your computer. If somebody out there understands what the benefit is to that, please comment, please write, please contact me, please let me know. Because from where I'm sitting, and I'd like to think that I'm not a total clod of dirt, intellectually speaking, that's just 100% a bag of stupid. It really, really, really is. Yeah. Was my migration difficult? The single biggest part of my migration was getting my files off of my old computer and onto the Mac. Getting a lot of music, getting a lot of movies, finding compatible software for some of the tools that I used. It was easy finding compatible software on the internet. It just took a little bit of work. I'm a savvy enough user. That wasn't a big problem. Moving the data was a pain in the ass. Still a pain in the ass. File storage is a huge problem. File storage is a huge problem. Unless you pay the money and you get a giant NTFS drive, and then pay the money to actually be able to use the NTFS drive to read and write to it. Yeah, it's a huge pain in the ass. And I finally did have to break down and pay some money just for the privilege of being able to read and write the data off of all of the external storage media that I had. That was just massively, massively frustrating. Other than that, the migration was actually really, really easy. And the reason behind that, again, to bring it back up, is you can just install anything you want that was on your PC over to your Mac again. There are so many things that I keep up in the cloud anymore. Having access to that, having access to the programs that allow me to access that secured storage in the cloud, that's just absolutely fantastic. Do I use Apple's iCloud service? No, I do not. No, I do not. There's not a whole lot of strictly Apple stuff that I do use. The biggest benefit that I get out of the Apple operating platform right now is its stability. And its consistency. There are PCs out there that run faster, much faster. There are PCs out there that would smoke this thing like a ham. But there are also PCs out there that run quite a bit slower. And there are PCs out there that used to run fast, but they've been used hard and they haven't been cleaned and maintained as often as they should have been. Now there's a rootkit on them, or now you haven't cleaned your temporary files off, or and suddenly your fast computer is no longer fast anymore. Suddenly it's slow, and you've got to do a factory data reset to get your speed back. I don't have to do that. I don't have those problems. My Mac might not be the fastest thing in the world out there, but it's extraordinarily consistent, and I absolutely love that. I really, really do. My migration wasn't that bad at all. If you're even remotely computer savvy, migrating from PC to Mac, it shouldn't be that difficult at all. Don't do it if you're a professional, unless you've got somebody in your IT department who has said, yes, I can help you migrate everything. Don't do it if you're a professional. It's just an invitation to want to slit your own wrists. It really, really is. If you don't know a whole lot about computers at all, it may prove to be extraordinarily frustrating for you. My recommendation, if you want to try, is by all means go ahead and try. But keep your PC around for another month or so before you get rid of it after you switch over to your Mac, because you may find yourself just in 2 weeks throwing your hands up and going, "Forget it. We're going back to England." So definitely keep your PC hanging around for a month if you're going to migrate. Overall, my year with a Mac, I said this with the MacBook when I was demoing it. I said it with my MacBook Air. I love it. I'm not even sure why. Maybe it's just because it's so effortless, and I'm done expending effort. I've spent a long time expending effort in order to make my computer run, in order to keep my computer running the way that I want it to run, and I feel like maybe I've earned a little bit of a reprieve. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I love it. I don't regret the purchase. I don't regret the purchase whatsoever. There are definitely some neat things that I'm seeing with Windows 10 that, again, Apple needs to really hurry and kind of get back in the groove on. Microsoft's gonna outpace them real soon if they keep this up, and Apple's gonna slow down again. But yeah, I don't regret what I did. I don't regret what I did at all. I'm not entirely sure what that makes me. Not entirely well.